The FIA is about to vote on something that could strip Mercedes of up to 15 horsepower, before the 2026 season even explodes into life. Pre-season testing is over. The data is sealed. And now, just days later, the governing body has confirmed an imminent engine vote that directly targets how Mercedes' power unit is measured. Cold, it looks legal. At race temperature, rivals believe it could be a completely different story. We are talking about a compression ratio that reads 16:1 in the garage, but may climb closer to 17 or even 18:1 when the engine hits 130 degrees Celsius. That difference could mean 3 to 4 tenths per lap on high-speed circuits. Over a season, that is dominance. Championship control. Era-defining advantage. Now imagine that advantage disappearing mid-season because of a single rule clarification. No retroactive punishment. No dramatic scandal. Just a mandatory hot test that could force a redesign overnight. And here is the part that makes this explosive. To pass, the vote needs a supermajority of manufacturers, plus the FIA, plus Formula One management. If that happens, Mercedes do not just lose an edge. They lose stability. They lose momentum. They risk starting a new engine era already on the defensive. This is not a minor technical tweak. This is a potential balance of power reset in Formula One. Subscribe now, because what happens in this vote could decide who controls the sport for the next 5 years. Pre-season testing is officially done. The cars have stopped running. The lap times are frozen. And normally, this is the moment teams breathe. Instead, Mercedes are facing something far more dangerous than a rival upgrade. In Bahrain, there was a serious power unit failure during testing. The FIA stepped in and inspected the engine closely. At the exact same time, rival manufacturers were submitting a formal dossier questioning Mercedes' compression ratio concept for 2026. That timing matters. Because this was not a random suspicion. It was organized concern. Under the new regulations, the maximum compression ratio drops from 18:1 down to 16:1. Clear number. Clear ceiling. But the detail that opened the door is how that number is verified. Right now, compression is measured only when the engine is cold. Ambient temperature. Static conditions. No race heat. No expansion. No real operating pressure. And here is the accusation that has shaken the paddock. Several teams believe Mercedes designed their combustion chamber and piston geometry to behave differently once the engine reaches full race temperature. Cold, it measures a perfect 16:1. Fully compliant. But as the engine heats up, as metal expands under extreme pressure, the effective compression could rise. 17:1. Possibly even closer to 18:1 under load. That difference is not cosmetic. It could translate into 10 to 15 extra horsepower. On circuits like Silverstone or Monza, that means 3 to 4 tenths per lap. Over a championship, that is the margin between fighting and controlling the season. And here is the uncomfortable truth. If Mercedes achieved this within the wording of the regulation, they did not break the rules. They optimized the measurement procedure itself. They engineered around how the FIA checks compliance. And that is why the governing body is now reacting. The FIA has been working with manufacturers on a secondary test. A hot compression test. Conducted at approximately 130 degrees Celsius. Realistic operating temperature. If compression rises above 16:1 under those conditions, the advantage disappears instantly. But here is where tension spikes. The proposal is not about rewriting the entire engine rulebook. It is about adding this hot test mid-season. Likely around the summer of 2026. Not retroactive. Not immediate. But mandatory from that point forward. Which creates a dangerous split scenario. Mercedes could start the season completely legal under the current cold measurement system. Win races. Build points. Establish momentum. And then face a new test protocol halfway through the year. If the engine fails that hot test, the specification becomes ineligible. Not fined. Not retroactively punished. Simply not allowed to continue in that form. And redesigning an internal combustion engine under development restrictions is not simple. The architecture is largely frozen. Upgrade opportunities are limited. Additional development allowances only apply if a manufacturer is significantly behind in performance. If Mercedes are leading, they may not qualify for that flexibility. So this is not just a technical clarification. It is a structural threat. Because if their advantage depends on how compression behaves when hot, and that measurement method changes, performance could drop instantly. And we have not even reached the political dimension yet. Because for this vote to pass, 4 out of 5 manufacturers must agree. Plus the FIA. Plus Formula One management. That means a broad consensus inside the paddock that something needs to be addressed. The question now is simple, but brutal. Did Mercedes engineer a masterpiece within the rules? Or did they build their advantage around a measurement system that is about to evolve? Pre-season testing is finished. The stopwatch phase is over. Now it is about legality under heat. And when that vote happens, we will finally see whether Mercedes' 2026 engine is untouchable or vulnerable in a way no one expected. Now let's talk about what happens if this vote passes. Because the vote itself is only the trigger. The real shock comes after. If the hot compression test becomes mandatory around the summer of 2026, Mercedes would face a completely new validation process. The engine would be measured not in a calm garage at ambient temperature, but under realistic operating heat, around 130 degrees Celsius. The temperature it actually sees on track. If the compression ratio stays at 16:1, nothing changes. Mercedes walk away stronger. They silence Ferrari. They silence Red Bull. They silence every rumor. And they begin the new era with authority. But if it climbs above 16:1, even slightly, that engine specification becomes a problem. Not politically. Technically. It cannot be homologated under the updated protocol. Which means Mercedes would have to modify it before continuing. And here is why that is so serious. The internal combustion engine under the 2026 regulations is heavily restricted once homologated. Major architecture changes are not freely allowed. Development windows are limited. Extra upgrade opportunities only apply to manufacturers who are significantly behind in performance. If Mercedes are competitive, they do not have that safety valve. So imagine this scenario. Mercedes start the season strong. Their power unit delivers exceptional straight-line speed. McLaren benefits. Williams benefits. Momentum builds. The narrative forms that Mercedes have nailed the new era. Then summer arrives. The hot test is enforced. Compression reads above the limit. Now they must reduce it. Reducing compression is not just turning a dial. It affects combustion efficiency. It affects power delivery. It affects fuel consumption. It changes ignition timing. It changes thermal load. And most importantly, it reduces peak performance. We are not talking about losing 1 or 2 horsepower. If the suspected advantage is real, we are talking about 10 to 15 horsepower disappearing. On certain tracks, that is multiple tenths per lap. That is the difference between pole position and third row, between controlling strategy and reacting to it. And here is where the psychological impact kicks in. If Mercedes are forced to step back mid-season, confidence takes a hit. Engineers begin questioning assumptions. Drivers feel the loss on the straights. Customer teams adjust expectations. The entire ecosystem shifts. Now consider the harder scenario. If the FIA clarifies that the 16:1 limit must apply at all times while the car is running, and a rival team protests after a race, claiming that compression exceeded the limit under real conditions, then it becomes a technical infringement. That means potential disqualification from that event. Loss of driver points. Loss of constructor points. Immediate withdrawal of that engine specification until corrected. Right now, there is no indication of retroactive punishment. Anything done under the existing cold test would remain legal. But from the moment the hot protocol becomes active, the margin for error disappears completely. And that is why this is terrible news ahead of the vote. Because even if Mercedes believe they are fully compliant, the uncertainty alone destabilizes planning. Do they prepare a safer engine map now? Do they redesign components preemptively? Do they risk running close to the edge until summer? Every option carries risk. And there is one more dimension. Politics. For the vote to pass, it needs overwhelming support. For manufacturers. The FIA. Formula One management. If that coalition forms, it sends a message. The paddock believes there is something significant at stake. If it fails, that also sends a message. That interpretation within the letter of the law still defines Formula One. So Mercedes are not in trouble because they are weak. They are in trouble because the rules around them might tighten. Because the measurement might evolve. Because what was optimized for a cold garage could be exposed under race heat. Pre-season testing is over. The stopwatch battle has paused. Now the real fight is in meeting rooms. In technical documents. In confidential votes. And when that vote result is announced, we will finally know whether Mercedes engineered the most powerful foundation of the new era, or built it on a measurement system that is about to change. But there is one final angle that makes this even more dramatic. Because this is not just about Mercedes. It is about the beginning of a brand new power unit era. 2026 is not a minor regulation tweak. It is a full reset. New electrical balance. Higher reliance on battery deployment. New sustainable fuels. A different aerodynamic philosophy built around engine characteristics. Whoever gets the engine right at the start does not just win races. They shaped the competitive order for years. That is why this vote feels urgent. Because if Mercedes truly unlocked extra compression under race heat, and that translates into 10 to 15 horsepower, then they are not just slightly ahead. They are structurally ahead. And structural advantages in Formula One are dangerous. Think back to previous engine resets. When one manufacturer nailed the regulations early, the gap was not closed in months. It took seasons, massive investment, organizational shifts, and sometimes complete philosophical changes. No rival wants to spend the next 5 years chasing a compression advantage that was technically legal under a cold test. That is the fear driving this imminent vote. Now imagine you are inside Mercedes' high-performance powertrains right now. You have built an engine optimized down to microscopic tolerances. Thermal expansion calculated precisely. Combustion chamber volumes engineered with extreme precision. Everything designed to maximize efficiency within the current measurement framework. And suddenly, that framework may expand. Do you wait and see how the vote lands? Or do you begin developing a safer configuration immediately? If you move too early, you might sacrifice performance unnecessarily. If you move too late, you risk scrambling mid-season. Every decision now carries strategic weight. And there is another layer most people overlook. Customer politics. If Mercedes are forced to reduce compression and lose performance mid-season, customer teams feel it instantly. McLaren's title hopes shift. Williams' rebuilding momentum shifts. Sponsors react. Narratives change. Momentum evaporates. Formula One is not only about engineering. It is about perception. If rivals believe Mercedes exploited a gray area, even legally, pressure builds. If the FIA appears to intervene, even procedurally, narratives form. And narratives influence politics. That is why this vote is more than a technical formality. It is a statement about how Formula One wants to define fairness in the next era. Strict interpretation of numbers. Or strict interpretation of intent. And here is the tension that makes this impossible to ignore. If Mercedes pass the hot test easily, they become untouchable. They prove they engineered excellence within both the letter and the spirit of the rules. The accusations disappear overnight. They begin the new era as clear benchmark. But if they fail, even by a small margin, the effect is immediate. Power reduced. Concept questioned. Momentum interrupted. And perhaps most damaging of all, rivals gain belief. Belief is fuel in Formula One. When competitors sense vulnerability, development accelerates. Aggression increases. Pressure multiplies. So when the FIA confirmed it is pushing forward with this imminent vote, it did not announce a penalty. It announced uncertainty. Uncertainty about whether Mercedes' greatest strength survives a new measurement. Uncertainty about whether the new era begins with stability or disruption. Pre-season testing is finished. The performance numbers are in. Now everything depends on one temperature, one procedure, one vote. And when that result is revealed, we will finally know whether Mercedes built the most dominant engine of the next generation. Or whether that dominance was balanced on a measurement that is about to change.